Well, hello, Nativity Bible heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Bible Study Wednesday. And I have got a great one for you today. Today is a classic. It is 2 Kings chapter 2. And I know all of you are saying, oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, 2 Kings chapter... No, you're not. I know you're not saying that. 2 Kings chapter 2 is the final time we see the prophet Elijah in the Old Testament. Not the final time we see the prophet Elijah in the Bible, just the last time we see the prophet Elijah in the Old Testament. And it's important because the transfiguration of Jesus, remember when he went to that place with his disciples and they saw him transfigured and they saw him with three people, Moses, and he was talking with Moses and Elijah. Well, Elijah, a lot of what happens to Elijah happens to Jesus. And you see in Elijah, we see in the prophet Elijah, a lot of what Jesus goes on to do, but Jesus also changes some things. So Moses, we covered him a long time ago, right? He died in Deuteronomy. But here in Elijah, we have the other great molder of the faith of Israel, and those are the two personages with whom Jesus talked with at the top of the Mount of Transfiguration. So, 2 Kings chapter 2, here we go. Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Okay, we've already been introduced to Elisha. Elisha is going to be, I think it happened back in 1 Kings chapter 19 or something like that, where Elijah was having a problem. He was kind of having a little bit of a breakdown in his ministry. And one of the things that the Lord did to help him was to tell him, lay your mantle on this man Elisha. He'll succeed you. And he gave Elijah some things to do. Well, that was his rough patch, if you will. That was Elijah's rough patch. And in this chapter, it's going to actually formally get moved across. Now, due to the fact that the opening line says that the Lord was about to take Elijah up by a whirlwind, it's like, okay, that's obviously not the point of the story. Yeah, the point of the story is Elisha, and how does Elisha respond in taking up this mantle, okay? So we're already told, yeah, Elijah's going. We don't get it narrated and for a few more paragraphs, but due to the fact that the narrator already tells us that right here at the very beginning, that means that there's something else we need to look for as far as what's important about it and what's special about it. Which isn't to say that the way he leaves isn't special, but there's got to be more to it if our narrator doesn't want to keep us in suspense about that. Elijah, and they were on their way from Gilgal. So what is Gilgal? It's a little town between Jericho and the Jordan River. And why were they there? We don't know. Look at this. Elijah said to Elisha. Now remember, Elijah already knows Elisha. Not only does he know that Elisha is going to succeed him in his prophetic ministry, but he himself laid his mantle on him and said, oh yeah, you're going to be this person. And remember that time, I guess Elisha was working with the oxen, and when Elijah does his act toward him, Elijah then slays the oxen and burns the yokes as the fire and sends a sacrifice to God. So Elisha has already said yes to this, okay? The only question was when. okay? Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." Okay, Bethel is on up a little bit farther east, about 6 miles or so. We don't know why he's going to Bethel, but listen. But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." We don't really know what's in the mind of everybody here, but we do get that Elisha knows that Elijah is about done. And Elisha wants to be there for when he's done, because he knows that there's something in it for him if he does, if he stays, if he's with him till the end. He knows there's something in it for him. He doesn't know exactly what yet. Listen to this. So they came down to Bethel, verse 3. The company of prophets, the literal word there in the Hebrew is the sons of the prophets, but it's like a prophet, like the prophets that lived there. Not always the brightest ones. A little bit like the disciples of Jesus, in that they weren't always the brightest. They were in as far as like, oh yeah, he's our guy. But they didn't always catch on. Okay, look at this. The company of the prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." So this is kind of like when a kid comes up to you and tells you something you already know, and it's like, but yet the fact that they're telling you this, it makes no difference. Only it's like, of course I know that. You don't think I know that? How could you think I didn't know that? Just keep silent, okay? Shh. All right, verse 4. Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here." Remember where they are? They're in Bethel. "For the Lord has sent me to Jericho." Now Jericho is like back toward the Jordan River. So this is kind of a meandering thing. We don't know exactly what Elijah is doing. Maybe he's just touching base with places that he used to minister or taught, because that's where the sons of the prophets were, the company of prophets. Verse 4, middle of 4. "But he said, as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." Okay, this is Elisha again. So they came to Jericho. The company of the prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent." So this is a different company of prophets, a different venue. But it's very possible that Elijah is doing a farewell tour with his protégés, with his students. It's very possible, and they're all giddy. They're all giddy about it. And Elisha knows that he's going to inherit this ministry, but yet he's convinced that if he doesn't stick with him, that there's something that's going to happen that wouldn't somehow affect the transfer. Like he wants, there's something he really wants out of it. Let's find out what that is. Verse 6. Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." Now the Jordan was farther east, and they had just been. They started at Gilgal, which wasn't far from the Jordan, and then they went on west to Bethel, and then they went back east to Jericho, and now they're going a little bit farther east back to the Jordan River again. Then Elisha said, "Come, send me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So we've heard him say this, 2 or 3 times now? So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of the prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. So there is now a cadre of followers that have kind of like picture it like when the golfer is winning and the people crowd around and follow him to the 18th green, that kind of thing. Well, that's what's going on here. Verse 8, now they're at the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other until the two of them crossed on dry ground. This crossing, this is the third time we have a crossing like this in Scripture. The first time we had a crossing like this was when they were during the Exodus, when they were leaving Egypt and going into the wilderness. Remember, Moses raises his arms, all of that. And then we had it again in the book of Joshua when the Israel armies crossed over into Israel, and they actually crossed the Jordan, and at a point where they had the Ark of the Covenant, I think it was, with them. This imagery of crossing over is imagery that is supposed to convey high importance. It's a big deal. This isn't just an everyday occurrence. We're entering into the realization of a promise. We are going here. It's like it's saying we're going here into a mystery. We're entering. We just don't know what's on the other side. We just know that we have to go there. Yes, there's a promise of God of something that's on the other side. So we have to cross in order for there to be a receiving of that blessing. But here, the activity takes on even a more mythical quality. Because remember, there's only there's those two, and then there's the prophets that followed along, right? But only the two of them crossed. But here, get this, they're going which direction? Yeah, they're going back on the east side of the Jordan. So it's almost like a reverse of the entry into Jerusalem under Joshua. Here, it's an exit back out. Interesting, huh? Let's see how that plays out. All right, where did I stop? And they cross on dry ground. The on dry ground, that's kind of a little bit of a catchphrase that tells us, oh, we're supposed to remember what? Yeah, the previous two crossings, the one with the Ark of the Covenant with Joshua and the time of the crossing during the Exodus. Okay, verse 9. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." So Elijah is now being more amenable to Elisha. They have stepped. If this were an episode, if you ever watched the Twilight Zone back in the when it was on, well, I didn't watch it when it was on. I still watch it in reruns, but this is where the camera would cut over to Rod Serling. It's a dimension of time and space. Elijah and Elisha are about to enter the Twilight Zone. This is what's going on. Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." Okay, in Deuteronomic law, the eldest son was entitled to a double portion of the inheritance. All the other sons got single portions. The eldest son got a double portion. And what it is a recognition on behalf of Elisha that his relationship with Elijah is as a son, as eldest son, as one who rightfully inherits what the Father is, who continues the work of the Father, who basically becomes the Father in the Father's absence because the Father is going away, is leaving. And it is the way the Son steps into and basically becomes what the Father had been because the Father is no more. This is the Elisha thing. Let me inherit a double share of your spirit. Verse 10. This is Elijah. He responded, "You have asked a hard thing." Interesting. Why is that? Why is that hard? I don't know. Maybe Elijah wasn't so sure Elisha would actually be able to fulfill this thing, he says. Look at this. "Yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." So he knows that he's going to be departing. I'm not so sure he knows exactly that it's going to happen right now, okay? But something is definitely going to happen. Elijah doesn't know if Elisha will be there for it. But yet we've had Elisha's commitment where he's like saying, "No, I ain't going nowhere. I'm sticking with you." And Elijah is still like a little bit like, "Oh, we'll see, won't we?" Oh, if you see, won't you? Yes. Verse 11. "As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire. Okay, so think of it in terms of like this: fiery chariots and fiery horses separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven." Notice it doesn't say that Elijah rode in the chariot. It just says that that's what they saw. Okay. No, it didn't actually say that they saw that, does it? It says, as they continued, a chariot, it separated the two. So there's this cosmic, mythical, mystical, mysterious thing that happens. And Elijah and Elisha, you can imagine between them, there's the chariots of fire and horses. Remember we had horses and chariots in the Exodus with remember the Pharaoh, and so it's not like the first time we've seen horses and chariots, but they're fiery. Okay, we've had fiery other things. We've had a fiery serpent. Remember the serpent that bites, the poisonous serpent. So this fiery thing. Look, Elisha notices something in verse 12. Elisha kept watching and crying out. So he never turned away. He's seeing everything. He's like soaking it all in because he knows what he told him. Hey, if you see me, then you'll get that. And so he's committed, right? Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." So what is he saying? He's not just exclaiming. He's proclaiming. And he's seeing the nature of what Elijah's ministry had been and what his ministry, consequently, will have to be, which is as the divine warrior. Remember, the motif of the ancient Yahwistic religion is that the Lord Yahweh is their heavenly defender, the one who goes to battle for them, the one who wins the battle. And in this vision of chariots and horses between them, and in Elisha's exclamation, he's proclaiming Elijah as, oh, the prophetic ministry and what you have done and what I am now taking on is as that, as the defender, as the warrior, as Yahweh's warrior, as that's the function of the prophet, is to be like that for the people. And if you think about it more past, go on into the New Testament, that's kind of what Jesus also was, right? I don't mean kind of, but that's what Jesus was as the Son of God, right? The defender. He was the true horses and chariots, the true nature of God for his people, that he was willing to go through the cross and the death and all of that in order to effect salvation for all humanity. Elisha is recognizing that in this exclamation, Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. So he did see and he did understand. But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces, which means he got the gravity of the situation. When you tear your clothes, when you grasp your clothes and tear them, it means that it's a deep sign of grieving, okay? It's a deep sign of grieving, of like, oh. Even though he knew Elijah was going, he can't hide his grief, okay? Verse 13. So he picked up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water, saying, Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? When he had struck the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. Notice that in this crossing back, Elisha is crossing back. Remember, he's in this mystical, mysterious place where this event happens that's supra-historical. And he's going back, and the water doesn't just part by him doing exactly what Elijah did. Before, he struck it, boom. He struck it, and notice it doesn't say it immediately parted. He says these words, oh, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? It appears that it didn't work immediately like he had thought. And this is an expression of dismay, a little bit like, oh, wait, didn't it work? Kind of a thing, all right? And it says, when he had struck the water, I think that in the Hebrew, I think it's the intimation here is that he struck it again, the water again, all right? And that's when the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. This is backed up in, if you look at the Hebrew, but the way it was translated, it gives us an idea, it gives us a picture of like, oh, this is just something you added. No, I think that it took two strikings with the mantle in order for the parting to happen. And so there was a moment of doubt. There was a moment of, uh-oh, did it not take? And then it happened. So, yes, that's Elijah, or that's Elisha, right? No, verse 15, look at this. So remember, he's crossing back over. That's where those prophets were waiting. When the company of prophets who were at Jericho saw him at a distance, remember, they had come with him from Jericho to the edge of the Jordan, and then they went on over. Okay, so when the company of the prophets who were at Jericho saw him at a distance, they declared, the spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha. They came to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. That's the point of the chapter right there. The fact that this transference fully takes place. The how of it, yes, is phantasmagorical, yes, but that's not the main point of it. The main point is Elisha now has that ministry, and it is recognized by the people. The prophet. So remember when Jesus is transfigured, and Peter says, he says, oh, "This is great, Lord. Let's live here. Let's build something and commemorate all of this with Elijah and 3 booths, one for Moses, one for Elijah, one for you, and Jesus and one for you." And yet Jesus is like, "Oh, Peter, really? No." But here they get it, but there's a little bit of not getting if we stay tuned. Look at this. Verse 16, they said to him, "See now, we have 50 strong men among your servants. Please let them go out and seek your master. It may be that the Spirit of the Lord has caught him up and thrown him down on some mountain or into some valley." So, okay, here's that element that we see reflected in Jesus' disciples of like, oh, wait a second, you don't really get what's going on here. He gone. Elijah gone. He isn't just displaced, he gone, all right? So even though they said the right words, the spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha, there still was a little bit of like, "Doi, doi, doi, doi. Oh, let's go look for him now." No, they're not gonna find him, okay? That's the aspect that we see reflected in Jesus' disciples. So much of this is paradigmatic of what we see in the Gospels. And at the end it says, he responded, no, do not send them. Elisha knows that would be in vain. Verse 17, but when they urged him until he was ashamed, he said, "Send them." So it is possible to be urged to the point of feeling bad for not letting them go. So that's basically what's being said here. That's how he said, "Okay, fine, send them, go." So they sent 50 men who searched for 3 days. Oh, 3 days? 3 days? But they did not find him. Not unusual that it's a 3-day tomb thing for Jesus. Verse 18. When they came back to him, this is Elisha, in parentheses, he had remained at Jericho. He said to them, "Did I not say to you, do not go?" Wow. Okay, so Elisha has stepped into this ministry, and the sons of the prophets, the college of prophets, the company of prophets, recognize it as such. Now we are going to have some street cred. Remember how when we were initially introduced to Elijah, there were some activities that he did that gave him street cred, that gave him a full, it was clear that that he was a man of God. Remember, the widow that he stayed with, and her son, and the food, and all of that extended the food. He if you're going to talk about a prophet in this narrative world, you're going to have street cred, street credentials on the street, doing something that people talk about that establishes your reputation as a man of power. Jesus does the same thing in the Gospels, if you think about it. Look at this. Now the people of the city said to Elisha, "The location of the city is good, as my Lord sees, but the water is bad, and the land is unfruitful." There's a lot of salt that close to the Dead Sea. So he said, "Bring me a new bowl and put salt in it." So they brought it to him. Then he went to the spring of water and threw the salt into it and said, "Thus says the Lord, I have made this water wholesome. From now on, neither death nor miscarriage shall come from it." So the water has been wholesome to this day, according to the word that Elisha spoke. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, even today you can go to Jericho, and there's an alleged spring there that women line up and say, "Hey, you drink from here, you're not gonna have any miscarriages." This is one of those stories that tells us about. I haven't used the word in so long, and it's not coming to my head. It's one of those stories that answers the question, well, why is it like that today? Well, here's what he says. So what is to this day, okay? So the water's been, so this is an activity. Yeah, it's a little bit mystical, magical, or whatever, but it's something that goes toward developing his credentials, his street cred as a prophet. There's another incident. Oh, look, this is a fun one. Oh, look at this one, verse 23. He went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, and if you're going to be leaving the Jordan Valley and you're going west, you're going to be going up because you're down already, so you're definitely going to be going up. He was going up the way. Some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go away, bald head. Go away, bald head." I think it's the old King James version that says, "Get out of here, baldy," or something like baldy. We got to remember, this stuff was written before we, saw childhood as a time to be prized and such. This is back in the day when children were just a nuisance. And if you could survive childhood and become an adult, then more power to you. But children and women, they didn't have rights, they didn't have privileges, they didn't have respect. So consequently, this happens. When he turned around and saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. 42 is a popular number of victims to fall victim of a killing. It happens with Jehu. It happens another time. This isn't the only time in the Bible, is what I'm trying to say, where the number is 42. It's just a number of victimhood. This is street cred. This is how you get a reputation of like, oh, don't say anything bad about him. Did you hear about those boys? Yeah. So this is all about street credentials, right? And again, like I said, this post-enlightenment appreciation that we have for childhood and children and protection and such like that, our narrator isn't bothered by all of those things because this is all written before that. So we shouldn't judge him too harshly, and we should just appreciate is the word, the story for what it's trying to say. And what it's trying to say is that this guy is the real deal, and you don't mess with him. Don't you mess with Elisha. Okay, verse 25. From there he went on to Mount Carmel. Now, when we hear Mount Carmel, yeah, that's where Elijah had the big showdown with the prophets of Baal. Yep. And then returned to Samaria. Samaria is the capital city of Israel, of the northern kingdom. So this is the denouement of the story of Elisha develop his credentials so that when he starts his ministry, that people know exactly who he is. So that's the purpose of these stories after the whole whirlwind and the prophets and all of that. So I love that story. And I've already told you how I think it applies to Jesus, and it explains a lot about what we see in the Transfiguration story, what we see in the way the disciples responded to Jesus. Remember at the beginning where they were all saying that, don't you know that your master's going to be here? And he would say, don't say anything. And he said that like 2 or 3 times, right? Remember in the Gospels when Jesus would tell them, they would say, don't tell anybody what you saw here. A little bit of that secret motif, that motif of like, keep a lid on it. It's not the right time. Yeah. That's what, that gets, we wouldn't have that in the Gospels, is what I'm trying to say. We wouldn't have that in the Gospels if we didn't have it here. There's a lot of things that happen with Jesus and during Jesus' ministry and in Jesus' lifetime that we wouldn't, our gospel writers wouldn't be telling us if it hadn't happened differently, hadn't happened previously with another man of God like this. Why that's important is because it teaches us to look at not just similarities, but differences. And when we get the differences, especially with regard to when you compare Moses and Elijah and Jesus, Moses did die. Moses was buried. Moses didn't enter the promised land. Elijah didn't die. We're told that he was, went into heaven in a whirlwind. Jesus did die and was ascended. Oh, interesting, huh? Yeah. This is why we read the Old Testament. We all of a sudden get what our gospel writers were trying to do in wrapping up the experiences of God's leaders in front of his people and how he deals with all of that. So I believe that's entirely and wonderfully instructive to us all. So I hope you find a blessing in that for yourself and let yourself appreciate what the scriptures are doing and how the inspired writers develop these motifs and themes, and find in that for yourself a blessing that teaches you how to read scripture and how to appreciate scripture. Until then, peace.